Welcome, everyone. Good morning to those who are gathered here in the sanctuary on Rugby Road and to all who are joining us online today. As we come together for worship, we begin with a musical prelude, African Song Number 4, written by the South African composer Abdullah Ibrahim, played by Scott DeVeaux.
About
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. Welcome to the UU Congregation of Charlottesville. My name is Mary Beth Wiley, and I'm happy to be leading worship this morning with our music director, Scott DeVeaux. This sanctuary was built over 70 years ago on land that was once the homeland of the Monacan people, and that was once cared for by enslaved people from Africa and their descendants. We honor all who dwelt here and all in our congregation whose lives led to this moment of our gathering. I invite you to take a moment to greet others who are with us in the worship. Those online can unmute and say hello, and those here in the sanctuary or social hall are welcome to greet your neighbors, especially those you may not know.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Hi. See you.
See, I'm trying to see everybody's faces.
How are you doing, Tasha?
I'm okay. I'm in my chair and I'm hanging in there, you know.
Yeah, good.
Doing what I have to do. So,
Right.
but I'm doing all right.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are a number of us staying out of the heat and humidity today.
It's pretty bad, isn't it?
It is awful.
Oh my God. I've never felt it this way here in Virginia.
Oh,
I
have.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. Good day for going to a movie, huh?
Definitely stay inside.
I'm in Pennsylvania where it's nice.
Nice.
This is an incredible change from
We offer a
Massachusetts
special
and Maine.
welcome to newcomers
Here we go.
and invite you to join us for fellowship
yeah.
after the service in the social hall. Feel free to use one of our red coffee mugs, which are for newcomers to our congregation. Seating is also available in the social hall, where there's a live stream of the service. Everyone is welcome in the sanctuary, but if you need roomier space, the social hall can be a good option. Many thanks to all the folks helping us share worship both here and online, our greeters, ushers, and hospitality and logistics team. And special thanks to our AV tech, Rachel Buckland, supporting the dual platform worship both online and here on Rugby Road. Our board representative today is Jimmy Gorham. Jimmy, could you come up?
Thanks, Mary Beth. I'm Jimmy Gorham. I'm on the board, and I've been on the board for 3 years, and I have 1 more year to go. I'm going to ask you a question. Who knows what today is? What do I need to do? Oh, more like that. Okay. Who knows what today is? Sunday, right? And what does Sunday end in? Y. So it's a day that ends in Y, and I'm here to talk to you about stewardship. Because stewardship is something to talk about any day that ends in Y, all year round, okay? So I'm on the recently formed Stewardship Steering Committee that we formed 1 year ago, approximately, after we did our developmental goals. And there are 6 of us on the committee, and I'm here to talk to you about that, to let you know that we have these cards that are actually, you can see right in front of you on in your pews, that talk about stewardship, because stewardship is something to talk about all year round, not just during the pledge drive. And we want to make that, abundant, and we're leaning into that. Stewardship's all about, as we see here, caring, sharing, and giving. And it's about, of course, people think of stewardship, they think of treasure, but it's also time and talent, and about how we take care of each other and this congregation and this church with all those 3 things. Starting today, and hopefully every week, we're going to have a table in the social hall, a stewardship table, and I'm going to be there for a while after service today, and you can come up to me, whoever's is manning the table, and talk to us about stewardship. We have, to get back to money a little bit, we have on there sheets that we've prepared that help you understand how to pledge and how to track your pledge, because we've learned that is a significant problem and it's something we're leaning into and trying to address, that we're going to take, and we pledge to work to try to take care of that so that our pledging matches our books, matches what you think, and we're going to really try to make that as error-free as possible. And that's what I wanted to emphasize today, and enjoy the rest of the morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Here are our announcements this morning. Reverend Tim and Reverend Leah will be taking time away from leading worship during the month of July. And we're blessed to have a wonderful group of guest speakers and worship leaders throughout the month. Please check the newsletter for upcoming guest speakers. Please also check out the stairs to the lower hall outside near the Memorial Garden. They've been cleaned, mortared, and repainted thanks to the UU guys. Yeah. The yard sale team is accepting donations for the furniture and housewares sale, drop-offs on Summit Porch. Please, no books or clothing. This morning, we welcome our Artist of the Month for July, Linda Nakamuli. I don't know if I got that right, Linda. Linda, will you please stand up so we can recognize you? Welcome, and thank you for sharing your art with us. Everyone is invited to greet Linda in the social hall after worship this morning. The Communications Committee is currently updating our entire online presence, and we could use some current reviews of our congregation posted on Google and on the church Facebook page. If you have questions about posting a review, email communications@charlottesville.org. Are you new to the UU Congregation of Charlottesville? Want to learn more about us and about Unitarian Universalism? Join us next Sunday, July 9th, after the service for our monthly newcomer circle. Also, next Sunday, July 9th, from 12:30 to 1:30 in the church parlor, everyone is invited to join Kate Fraley in an adult faith development presentation about what's going on at the Albemarle County Regional Jail. Come learn about ACRJ's renovation, construction project, as well as some history, where we are now, concerns, potential actions, all are welcome. Excuse me. Please join us for coffee and conversation in the social hall after the service. Our call to worship today is by Gary Kowalski. In this quiet hour, may our spirits be renewed. May we be ready to extend hands to those in need, and with trust, receive the hand that is offered us. May we remember the principles that guide us and reflect upon those things that give meaning to our lives. And may our minds be open to truth and our hearts receptive to love as we give thanks for this life we are so very blessed to share. Come, let us worship together. As Gail Floyd comes forward to light the chalice, please join me in saying our unison chalice lighting words. We gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of open minds. This is a church of helping hands. This is a church of loving hearts. Please rise in body or spirit and join in singing hymn number 348, Guide My Feet, in a pandemic era performance by Scott DeVeaux.
I like reusing these things. Here we go. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. Hold my hand while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. Search my heart while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Thank you. You may be seated.
Let's have a moment of silence. We are an interconnected community that cares for one another. Part of how we embody this care is by making time to share the joys and sorrows we hold in our hearts. This community offers its love and support to what is closest to our hearts. Another way we show our care for one another is in sharing our financial gifts with our community and our congregation. Our social action collection for the month of June is for the Buck Squad, and here to speak about the Buck Squad is Brian Page.
How y'all doing? Is it right? How y'all doing? Yeah, and at the end of 2020, Charlottesville suffered 6 murders. This was unheard of in this town. And 4 of these murders was concentrated in one area, which is South First Street. So the last person that was killed was one of my friends, who was actually kind of like a social worker. He was just out there helping the kids, giving them ice cream and stuff like that. And he was caught by a bullet that wasn't meant for him, right? And he died. So probably about 40 or 50 people met at the church, the First African Church. And we started coming up with ideas how to address these problems. It was just people in the community that were tired. So in the end, it was like 15 of us that really stuck to it. And the city paid for us to get some training from a group called Cure Violence out of Chicago. They do this all around the world. They go to Palestine, Africa, and everywhere to just solve gang differences and stuff, right? So they trained us for a week. And ever since then, we've been rolling. We concentrated on South First Street, which we call a site. And since we've been there, it has been no murders. Not even one gunshot has went off in that community, right? So what we try to do from there is branch out into other communities. But in the process of doing that, we cut ourselves short from the community that we've been working in. But as of right now, we work in 6 different communities in Charlottesville, including downtown and UVA. We implementing a re-entry program for people coming home from prison. We go into the juvenile centers here in Charlottesville, we talk to them kids and have activities with them to prepare them for release when they come out. to try to offer them resources. And we also got a mentoring program that we just started. So if anybody is familiar with gun violence, it revolves around poverty. You know, people living in low economical areas causes this gun violence. It's activated by no fatherhood, lack of parenting, drug abuse, all these things these kids are affected by. We understand it. Now, our philosophy is based on relationships because everybody that's in our program was once a part of the problem. We've been to prison, we've been to jail, people been on everything that you could think of is the people that work for us. And we carefully train them, and then because we use relationships to get to the people. So I can go talk to gang members and you know, as a man, and get them to do things that I need them to do. And so far, everything is going good, but we can't be everywhere at the same time. All right, so you know, like I said, the thing is based on relationships. If we know people from our former lives, they respect us and they look up to us and they see what we are doing. And everybody has been receptive to it. And I just want to keep on building because we're trying to get to we can be in every area in Charlottesville, in all the low income areas, and even some areas that's not low income, where they people are needed. We also respond to any type of domestic violence calls, missing children calls. We have had all that. We have found 2 missing children. You know, so we just trying to do everything we can in our power to save our community.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks to all the people that are on the Buck Squad. Rachel, will you please show us the social action slide for giving for those who would like to make a donation now? In addition to giving online, if you would like to give today with cash or check, please use the social action collection envelopes here in the sanctuary and place your offering in the collection plate. No need to seal the envelopes because we do reuse them. In addition to our social action collection, each week we invite everyone into the spiritual practice of generosity by giving to the ministry of our congregation. Through your pledges and with the weekly Sunday morning offering together, our financial gifts support and build the future of our congregation. This is our shared ministry. During the music that follows, you may choose to make your Sunday morning offering by using the text address or going to our website. Here in the sanctuary, you are invited to share not only your financial gifts, but also share the joys and sorrows in your hearts. Those online may put them in the chat box, and those of you in the sanctuary may come forward to place a stone in the water. You may also leave us a note on the joy and sorrow paper provided on the credenza near the sanctuary doors. Let us dedicate all the many gifts we share with one another by saying, "We accept your gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely for the highest good."
Here's the unfamiliar part for me. I usually don't get up from that piano bench, but I've got to deliver a sermon, and I've also got to do a reading for you. I mean, this is one of those book report types of sermons. It's really based on Isabel Wilkerson's book, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. So I'll start with an excerpt from that. America is an old house. Wind, flood, drought, and human upheavals batter a structure that is already fighting whatever flaws were left unattended in the original foundation. When you live in an old house, you may not want to go into the basement after a storm to see what the rains have brought. Think on that. Choose not to look, however, at your peril. Whatever you are ignoring will never go away. We are like homeowners who inherited a house on a piece of land that is beautiful on the outside, but whose soil is unstable loam and rock. And many people may rightly say, I had nothing to do with how all this started. I have nothing to do with the sins of the past. My ancestors never attacked indigenous peoples, never owned slaves. Yeah, true. Not one of us was here when this house was built. But here we are, the current occupants of a property with stress cracks and bowed walls and fissures built into the foundation. We are the heirs to what is right or wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars or joists, but they are ours to deal with now. And any further deterioration is, in fact, on our hands. So, happy July 4th. Yeah, once again, we're here to talk about race in America. I know we just had Tim and Frank Deuce do that just a few weeks ago, but I'm a historian. Americans have to understand their history. Doesn't matter what your governor or whatever says, you have to be able to tell what is going on. Thank you. Okay, fine. We need to learn from our past. And I have to say that I've been a big fan of the 1619 Project. Started by Nicole Hannah-Jones, published in the New York Times, but, and this has been the source of some controversy. But for those who don't know, the typical way of starting a recounting of the history of the United States is with the 1620 landing at Plymouth Rock. And this just goes back a year. Actually, from our perspective here in Virginia, we say we were here first. So, why not start in Virginia? But really, it's because that's the year the first shipment of captured Africans appeared on our shores and our history with slavery started. Now, this, as I say, has generated a tremendous amount of controversy. There's been the 1776 Project trying to take America away from that beginning to something more optimistic. And I'm fully aware of that. I'm sympathetic. My idea of American history was always optimistic. I look at the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, and I see America as a beautiful building still governed by the Constitution that we wrote almost 250 years ago. But in terms of houses, that makes us an old house. I don't know what your houses are like. Mine is kind of old. Old houses have a lot of character. They have a lot of sense of rooms that have been added on, and Joyce added here and there. But they also tend to have creepy basements that flood and are full of crickets and stuff like that. I hope I'm not being autobiographical here, but don't come into my basement. So, okay. Slavery is there right from the beginning. And we know that here in this church that is now UUCville, but used to be the Thomas Jefferson Memorial Church. We all know about Thomas Jefferson. We know that he wrote "All men are created equal," which is a central founding document for our republic and a shining light to the world. Yes, 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 but he also owned slaves, to say nothing of his relationship with Sally Hemings, who after all was his wife's half-sister. If you don't know that, I can tell you about that later, but I mean, it's part of the creepiness of our early history that we have to deal with things like that. So America is the shining city on the hill, the bastion of freedom for the world, but it was also built on enslaved labor. One of my favorite quotes comes from Samuel Johnson, who once wrote, "How is it that we hear the loudest yelps of liberty among the drivers of Negroes?" So it's with this in mind that I put forth the idea that was presented by Isabel Wilkerson in her book, which is that America doesn't just have racism, America has a caste system. Caste system stratifies society into different layers. Some people are on top, some people are on the bottom. Or to use, I'll just quote her language here, a caste system is an artificial construction. It is a fixed, embedded ranking of human value that sets the presumed supremacy of one group against the presumed inferiority of other groups. She spends a lot of time, of course, thinking about the oldest caste system in the world, which comes from India. And the idea is with India that there are 4 castes. This comes from the god Brahma, and each of the castes is part of his body, so that the highest caste, the Brahmins, are from his head. These are the priests and teachers. And they're given a sort of a golden thread to wear so that they can feel that every day. Then there are the Kshatriyas, who are from his shoulders. These are rulers and especially soldiers. Then there are the Vaisyas that come from the thighs, who are merchants and traders, and the Sudras from the feet, who are laborers. Okay, those are the 4 castes. But there's another caste who are literally outcasts, the untouchables, now known as the Dalit, which means the broken people. And this is roughly 15% of the population. The Dalit are given occupations that everybody needs to have done, but nobody wants to do. And in India, that's cleaning latrines, often by hand, disposing of dead animals, sweeping streets, hauling rocks, scavenging. And all of this comes with a tremendous sense of shame that helps to cement them into place. The Dalit have lived in constant fear of being publicly humiliated, paraded naked, beaten, and raped with impunity by upper-class Hindus seeking to keep them in their place. Now, as far as modern day statistics, my statistics are not all that up to date, but the latest from India's National Crime Records Bureau, this is from like 2000, but at that point they said 25,455 crimes were committed against Dalits. That meant every hour 2 Dalits are assaulted. Every day 3 Dalit women are raped, 2 Dalits are murdered, and 2 Dalit homes are torched. And they say these are just the ones that were reported. Most of them are not reported. The people are just cannot even bear the thought of contacting the police. The Dalit do this not so much because of race, but because of who they are. They're identifiable primarily by their last names, which are related to the work that they do. But it's also things that are ingrained: their bearing, their accents, and their clothing.
which over the centuries were required to be lowly and menial, as well as a tendency to be darker skinned than upper class people, but not always. But all of this comes with things that should be strangely familiar to us. They're forbidden to share the same water. They're forbidden to intermarry. When they come on the sidewalk, they're supposed to get off for you. All of this is strangely familiar to us. As Wilkerson puts it, in both countries and at the same time, the lowest castes toiled for their masters. African Americans in the tobacco fields along the Chesapeake or in the cotton fields of Mississippi, Dalits plucking tea in Kerala and cotton in Nandurbar. They both worked as enslaved people first, but later, for the right to live on the land they were farming. For African Americans, that was called sharecropping. Dalits, it was called saldari. Both still confined to their fixed roles at the bottom of their respective worlds. And yes, caste system was officially outlawed in the Indian Constitution in 1950, just as we had Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. But things change very, very slowly. The justification between these two systems, though, is different. In India, caste is divine law. It comes from Brahma, it comes from the creation of the world. You'd better not mess with it. It's hereditary, it is immutable, et cetera, et cetera. We don't really have that. Yes, there is a passage from Genesis talking about Noah, saying that when Ham saw Noah naked after a drunken bout, he wasn't cursed, but his children were cursed. And a lot of preachers in the 19th century would use that as saying that God is justifying slavery. I think that we can see that that is primarily a pretext, because there was one thing that happened when that boat arrived on our shores in 1619. When people looked at the Africans and decided to make them, well, to work for them, but eventually to enslave them, there was one thing that was very convenient. It was their skin color, which made them immediately and permanently identifiable. And soon there were laws saying that any child born to a slave is going to be a slave. And pretty soon we get the whole idea that the caste system is tied up with race. And this caste system, as we know, pervasive and centuries long. Yes, we did have a civil war. We did finally end slavery. But what happened after that? Well, we had the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States. But there's a loophole. Except as a punishment for crime. Yeah. Got that? Our picture? Yes, right, chain gangs. Made up of people who were arrested for God knows what reason, but the basic idea was you could put them in chains and you could set them to work. And this is what built the railroads in the South. This is the fate of John Henry, who it turns out was originally a free black man from New Jersey who joined the Union Army, but ended up being arrested in Petersburg, Virginia, and ended up working on a, not exactly a chain gang, but was enslaved labor in the mountains between here and West Virginia, and that's where we get the John Henry song from. It's just making it clear that there are other ways to maintain all this stuff. Same way that the 15th Amendment, barred people from, prohibited barring people from voting based on race, but of course there were so many ways around that. It took until the Voting Rights Act of the 1960s to finally eliminate most of those, but then the Supreme Court said, things are okay. So, that has been seriously abused. And then we have the 14th Amendment, probably the most abused piece of the Constitution. The Equal Protection Clause forbids any state from denying any person within its jurisdiction to the equal protection of the laws. Well, one of the first things they did was to say, well, person can also mean a corporation. So that, in fact, Southern Pacific Railroad, for example, is one of the earliest ones in the 19th century to say, yes, this stands for us. And in fact, if you look at the number of cases that were taken to the Supreme Court between the time the 14th Amendment was founded in 1868 and 1912, I think there were 340 cases. About 28 of them had to do with Black people. The rest had to do with corporations. And now we have the fact that the same language has been literally used this week to eliminate affirmative action, a clause that was clearly meant to allow Congress to pass race-conscious legislation, like the creation of the Freedmen's Bureau to help former slaves get housing, food, and education. All of this stuff, these originalists are not looking at the context of this, and they are saying, in fact, it just says, don't use race at all. Everybody has to start the same. So, I mean, the hypocrisy of it is stunning, but that's this week's news. Now, I mean, I do have to grant that our caste system is less harsh than it used to be. I mean, over the course of my lifetime, we've had the civil rights revolution of the 1950s and 60s, which obviously eliminated the worst parts of Jim Crow, including segregation, bans on intermarriage, and hey, in 2008, we even elected a Black president. And for a lot of us, that just felt like, okay, we've finally gotten over a hump. And I think it's clear that in retrospect, that made things worse, because a lot of people saw his election as a sign that the caste system was really weakening. And you have to keep in mind that even though Obama won comfortably both times he was there, a majority of white people then voted against him. And all this has resulted in things over the past 7 years that are too numerous and pervasive to sum up here. I just have to kind of leave you with that. So, is the problem racism? And you can say yes, and you can also say no, not necessarily. Race and caste are intermingled, but as Wilkerson puts it, race is the skin, caste is the bones. Race is the excuse that we have used to explain why the caste system was created, and these days we don't even really believe in race anymore as a scientific concept. We have our DNA genome. We're aware that we are, 99.9% similar. It's just these tiny variations that produce different types of people. And it's also true that calling people racist no longer really works. According to Wilkerson, racism is one of the most, quote, contentious and misunderstood terms in our culture. It is radioactive. It's resented, feared, denied, lobbed back toward anyone who dares to suggest it. It's been reduced in our vocabulary to a feeling or a character flaw that determines whether one is a good person or not. It has come to mean an overt and declared hatred of a group, something that very few people are going to own up to. So as a personal attack, if you call someone a racist, you think you're forcing an admission, first of all, that is not likely to come, and that keeps the focus on a single individual rather than the system that created that individual, and gives cover for those who, by aiming at others, can present themselves as noble and bias-free for having pointed the finger first, all of which keeps the hierarchy intact. So by shifting the focus to race, perhaps this is a semantic gain but I think that it also makes it clear that this stuff is not about race, it's about power. These systems, as I said, are sturdy and long-lasting, and we really had one of the best in the world. There was another society that for a brief but notorious time tried to set up a caste system. I was also thinking of South Africa, but I'm talking about Nazi Germany. And when they were looking for legislation to try to define their Jews as outcasts, the place they came to was the United States of America, and specifically Virginia, because we're the ones who created the laws about miscegenation or racial mixture. We're the ones that defined exactly how you manage to monitor that stuff. And in fact, the Germans were very impressed by that. They finally decided they did not want to go as extreme as us. I think it's like you had to have 2 Jewish grandparents or 1 Jewish grandparent or something like that. They were not willing to go for the 1 drop of blood rule, which was our case, where you just say any amount of black blood is going to make you black. And that's the kind of thing that certainly would have exploded with 23andMe, as people are discovering, in fact, oh my God, I've got 0.01% black blood. I mean, that technically would have been enough under much of this legislation to suddenly demote you to the lower caste. That's not the way things actually worked in this country, but those were our laws. So what can we do about it? Well, as UUs, none of this is news. We've been doing anti-racist work for a long time, and I do note that at last week's General Assembly, the UUs did vote to revise the Covenant Clause, Article 2, in our bylaws to include a new commitment to, quote, dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. So that it's got 1 more year. In the next General Assembly, it'll have to pass by a 2/3 vote, but then that will be part of our new covenant. So we can applaud ourselves for that. We also have to do our own personal work on race, because it's embedded in everybody who grew up in this country. I have to say, I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and I got a heavy dose of it. My parents were not particularly racist. I didn't really get it from them. I got it from watching television. I got it from watching The Little Rascals. Any of you familiar with that thing? I mean, it came out in the 30s, and boy, if you look at it, it is just full of stuff that comes out of minstrelsy. It is just presenting black characters in ways that you just look at. In fact, I mean, Eddie Murphy did a thing about buckwheat on Saturday Night Live. That was one of his characters. Ote, you know, this kind of thing that he does. So everybody has to do that. I have to do this constantly. It never goes away. My wife likes to do co-counseling, which is a type of therapy that is discharging old hurts from your upbringing. And the idea is that if you discharge enough, you eventually will exhaust it. But they say it's like going to a cafeteria where you pick up a tray and immediately there's another tray underneath it. You pick up another tray and another tray pops up. And they say eventually you can exhaust the pile and there can be no trays left. For me, for this whole caste system, it's not going to go away in my lifetime. I'm going to be pulling out those trays 1 by 1. But I have to do it. I have to do it. I have to look at black people. And I remember that they say that when you see a face, you have a split second before things load in from your upbringing. And I have to look at black people and remember, yeah, no, you're not the person I thought you were, but I'm still going to think that for the rest of my life. And I just have to own up to it. I have to own up to the racism that is part of my upbringing. What does Isabel Wilkerson call for? Radical empathy. And let me close with this lengthy thing from the end of her book. She says, empathy is not sympathy. Sympathy is looking across at someone and feeling sorry, often at times of loss. Empathy is not pity. Pity is looking down from above and feeling a distant kind of sadness. Empathy is commonly viewed as putting yourself in someone else's shoes and imagining how you would feel. That's a start, but it is little more than role-playing, and it's not enough in the ruptured world we live in. Radical empathy, on the other hand, means putting in the work to educate oneself and listen with a humble heart to understand another's experience from their perspective, not as we imagine we would feel. Radical empathy is not about you and what you think you would do in a situation you have never been in and perhaps never will. It is the kindred connection from a place of deep knowing that opens your spirit to the pain of another as they perceive it. If each of us could truly see and connect with the humanity of the person in front of us and search for that key that opens the door to whatever we may have in common, it could begin to affect how we see the world and others in it. Each time a person reaches across caste and makes a connection, it helps to break the back of caste. In a world without caste, being male or female, light or dark, immigrant or native born, would have no bearing on what anyone was perceived as being capable of. In a world without caste, we would all be invested in the well-being of others in our species, if only for our own survival, and recognize that we are in need of one another more than we have been led to believe. A world without caste would set everyone free. Well, that's the end of my sermon. We are going to now sing a hymn. I know that when I was meeting with Reverend Tim, I said, there's this hymn that This Old House. I said, there's a hymn called This Old House, isn't there? And he just kind of looked at me and he kind of threw the hymnal at me because he knew there was no such hymn. But then I found out it's actually called This Old World. And that's the one that I want us to sing. So excuse me while I move from here over to there.
Ernie's a professor of music.
Oh, here we go. Okay. All right, cool. This Old World, number 315. Please rise in body or spirit. We'll have the words up there for us to sing along with in just a second. Thank you. So Mary Beth, if you can close off the chalice for us, put it out. I've essentially left you with the golden rule. Love your neighbor as you would love yourself. And perhaps that's all we need to guide us in this world. Thank you all for coming, and go in peace. And now I'm going to play a postlude.